Welcome to What is Going On for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on OMTimes' flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. Self-sabotage. We're all familiar with it. You set your mind on something you want to reach your goal weight, complete your training for a new career, save money, find your happy ever after with the perfect partner. You do everything right. You invest all your energies in achieving it. Then, just as your goal is in sight, you find yourself inexplicably stuck, unable to go that last few miles, or doing something dumb to screw it up. And once again, you're left feeling frustrated, sad, stressed, and angry with yourself for sabotaging the very thing that you really, really wanted. We've all done it, sometimes more than once, and rarely do we understand why. The answer, according to author, therapist, and founder of the New York Voice Dialogue Institute, Bridgit Dengel Gaspard, is that in truth, not every part of you wants what you think you want. Bridgit Dengel Gaspard joins me now to discuss her new book, The Final Eighth, which is a term she coined to describe this phenomenon, and she's going to explain how we can overcome our self-sabotaging ways by enlisting our inner selves to accomplish all of our goals. Bridgit Dengel Gaspard, welcome.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Sandie.
So, Bridgit, your book, The Final Eighth, offers a powerful technique called voice dialogue to help readers recognize and free themselves from hidden internal conflicts that are blocking their ability to achieve their goals. Now, before we get on to discussing this, I just want to say that you're a former performer. You've been involved with alternative theatre. You've wrote, co-produced and starred in one of the first web series, Mothers, the first cyber sitcom. What inspired the switch in career focus from performer to therapist and inner voice dialogue teacher and coach?
So I was a performer in New York City a long time ago and was really enjoying it. And I stumbled upon voice dialogue because I had read about it, and it electrified me. And I was thinking, this sounds amazing because I was doing improvisation and comedy at the time. So I read about it, and I hunted down the founders, the doctors Hal and Sidra Stone, who created it, which meant I found their 1-800 number and called them up and said, who's doing this in New York? Because the premise is that our healthy personality consists of many selves, and that's normal and healthy. And then voice dialogue is a literal technique where you go to a different part of yourself, say a perfectionist or a silly Willy or any part of you, because we all have lots and lots of parts, and then you speak from that part's point of view. So a silly self could tell you all kinds of fun things and reasons that it enjoys life, and also the rules it has about success. So at the time, it was really great because it helped me as a performer, so I could embody different parts of myself as the role demanded, and as well as figuring out how to highlight comedy. So when I was doing stand-up or writing sketch comedy, I could get into a particular type of self, and then that would help me get its point of view. And then, of course, opposites are integral to humor. So you could, one of the classics is, of course, the slob and the perfectionist. But as I got more and more voice dialogue, basically getting facilitated myself and then getting into training and learning how to train other people in it, I was blown away over and over how much healing was happening, and so quickly, that people were transformed when they got this very visceral sense that they were so much more than they thought they were, and certainly so much more than they had given themselves permission to be. That eventually that became so much more compelling. I went back to school and got my master's from Columbia University so that I could become a therapist and get clinical training and expertise. And now I've got all of both going on, and so I was able to write this book, which marries the two in terms of my clinical self and my creative self. And that's how it happened. It really was following the synchronicity of stumbling upon voice dialogue and realizing, wow, this is incredible.
So is this the same thing as in psychotherapy we hear about parts work? And there's other branches where they actually have, you sitting across from somebody else and treating them as if they're somebody that you want to say something to, like a grandfather or a parent?
Yes, I would say it's very much a part of what I call the parts family of therapy. And that's Gestalt, what you just described, and there's many others. And my understanding is that in terms of the Western psychoanalytic tradition, the first one to really bring the parts work to psychoanalysis in 1920 was an Italian named Assagioli, who felt that psychoanalysis, that's what it was at the time, did not address the fundamental need for humans to have a spirituality and a spiritual practice. And he's the one that realized, we've got these different parts, and we've got to have access to all of these parts to be whole, to be integrated. So it really, I think it's part of a wonderful tradition. Plus, Jung, of course, talked about the archetypes, and then the archetypes themselves come out of the Greek mythology and other mythology, not just Greek. And so, yes, voice dialogue certainly is part of that way of looking at the world and living in the world.
So where do these parts come from? I mean, at what age do they normally develop? Or is it something that they continue to develop throughout our life?
I would say both. So, again, voice dialogue is all about the healthy personality and healthy attachment. So when an infant is born, it's born with certain biological predispositions. It's temperament, it's preferences, it's level of sensitivity or hardiness or appetite for adventure and for safety. So some of that's just genetic. And then very early on in infancy, the baby figures out, okay, I obviously not with words, I need to make sure that I'm loved so I'm not rejected and abandoned and thus die. Because as we now know, you can feed a baby, but if you don't nurture the baby emotionally, that baby could die from not having that type of food. So the baby takes in the information from that household, and certain households reinforce parts and then those other aspects that they don't like in the infant, they push away or repress. And all of this is healthy, and we need our children to be able to hold it so that they use the toilet when they go to the bathroom. So again, this is a natural process. But what happens is if you lose access completely to yourselves, you have less energy and less intelligence because you've cut off aspects of yourself. And so the messages, like maybe in a particular family, boys should be X and girls should be Y. And so if the infant that grows into a toddler and on from there, they either follow, like, okay, I'll be a good girl and I'll be responsible and I'll be sweet and loving, or they could rebel against it. And then their primary selves are rebel, rule breaker. But either way, you're repressing the other side. And at a certain point, in order to move forward and to have a larger life, you want to have a direct relationship to these other aspects of yourself, many of whom contain what Jung calls your golden shadow. You learn that you've got these amazing capacities inside of you that are shut off, say, when you shut off big energies like passion and anger. And the fear is that it's going to, like, burn down the house. But if you have a direct relationship with anger, for example, it's not going to burn down the house because you're listening to your anger, and every self has a gift to offer. It has wisdom, and they also have a sting. Too much of a perfectionist can paralyze you. Not enough of a perfectionist means your work's so sloppy no one's interested in it. So that's what I also love about this technique, voice dialogue, is that you can turn up the volume on some, turn down the volume on others. As you get a direct relationship with these different parts of yourself, then you are able to align what feels right now, currently, and not just what was preferred in your upbringing. And that's part of the liberation process.
Okay, so not all of these parts of us want what we think we want. So I may think that, yes, I want to write this book, and then I find that I start it, or I don't start it because I've always been distracted by something else. Or if I do start it, I'm finding it really hard to finish it. And that is often because there's a part of me that doesn't actually want that. How do I find that part of me?
That's a great example. And so what you do is you ask the part, and many people have words for the part, like the resistor or the procrastinator or the overwhelmed part. And you literally ask it a series of questions, and I have tons of questions in the book. But if I were doing it with you, we would go to the part that doesn't want to write the book. And we want to really listen. It is not about asking this part of you to get on board with writing the book. When you're in center and have access to your different selves, you make the decision. But if we were to do voice dialogue with the part of you that does not want to write the book, we're curious. We're like, okay, why not? And what will happen? And what are you worried about? And what do you need from Sandie, for example? And so a lot of selves they all have wisdom, and a lot of them have genuinely excellent reasons for stalling the process. One client I had was 7/8 of the way there. She was in the entertainment field, and she was getting, as a performer, getting bigger roles in higher status theaters, and was suddenly self-sabotaging. So we went to that self, and she called it the resistor self. And that resistor self leaned in and kind of whispered a truth that I had been working with her for a year, and I didn't know. And she said, look, if my client moves up further, more and more socializing and networking is going to be required, and she's going to have an alcohol problem. And it was shocking. And so when we went back to center, my client actually started weeping because this part of her was correct. And so our work shifted, and we went to how do you say no? How do you manage the stress? How do you do the socializing, which is required? That's another reason I love this method, is we take life on life's terms. And so the whole shift of our work was about how to make boundaries, how to say no when you mean no. And then it's as if her stuckness point just melted because that part was accurate. And from that part, there's no question. You're either going to die an alcoholic or you're going to move up in a career. From that part, it's like, well, you're not moving up in a career. It's not worth it. And that was accurate. So you end up really appreciating what that part of you is trying to protect you from. And then you deal with the concerns. And you, often that part doesn't care. They really are caring about your life. And that's often why a stuckness is so hard to shift, because you're treating it as the problem, but it's actually the solution.
But how is it that part of her knew or believed that she was going to become an alcoholic? I mean, or is that just a fear that she's got and she's kind of projecting it but hiding from it?
It could have been either. I mean, that could, but in this particular case, it's like some of the selves that you don't pay attention to in classic psychotherapy, you would say they're being repressed or you're in denial. And so she was in denial because so this part just knew the truth of what was happening. And some people, you could say, they get a hunch, and that intuitive part of them picks up on something, and it's not really clear. It's like that. And in this particular case, that part was right, and my client did not resist at all. She just wept because it's like true. And there was addiction problem in her family. And then, of course, a lot of insights came to her.
Yeah. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and my guest today is author, therapist, and founder of the New York Voice Dialogue Institute, Bridgit Dengel Gaspard. And we're talking about her book, The Final Eighth, Enlist Your Inner Selves to Accomplish Your Goals, which offers a powerful process for identifying the hidden facets of us that often stand in the way of achieving our goals. We'll be back with more on our hidden selves and how we can learn the wisdom that they have to impart after this break.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes' flagship radio show, What Is Going On. As a long-time editor, book judge, spiritual magazine publisher and radio host, I've read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors and teachers. So I know what's worth reading and what isn't. Now, with the spiritual book market growing increasingly crowded, more and more people are seeking my help in finding the authentic voices, the empowering tools, and the genuine skip the BS guidance that will make the most difference to their spiritual development. So I decided to make it easier by bringing my knowledge, experience, and considerable network of contacts together in the No BS Spiritual Book Club. There are no ads, no joining fees, no obligations, and no BS. Just an ever-growing library compiled by recognizable and respected names of the 10 best books that help them the most on their journeys. Plus, free book excerpts, audios, and live video interviews where you can quiz them about their spiritual journeys and their 10 best list choices. Your time and money are valuable, your spiritual journey even more so. If you're looking for genuine guidance from people who've walked this path before you, check out Sedgbeer.com. Click on the No BS Spiritual Book Club tab and join the club. That's Sedgbeer.com, SEDGBEER.com. I'll see you there.
These are the sounds of a dinner that almost didn't happen. A dinner now served, thanks to people like you. Due to COVID-19, 17 million more Americans may face hunger. Feeding America is helping our neighbors in need. And if you're able, you can too. Donations are being accepted at feedingamerica.org/coronavirus. Brought to you by the Ad Council and Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Welcome back. Bridgit Dengel Gaspard, tell me about the difference between primary self and the other kind of self that you mentioned. Is it the hidden self and the primary self?
Got you. So our primary selves are the parts of us that we lead with. And usually, if we haven't thought about it as like ourselves as being full of many, many selves, it's usually when it's like, that's just me. And if you ask someone, okay, well, can you give like 4 or 5 adjectives of just me? Say, I'm responsible, I'm a good friend, I enjoy laughing, and I take hikes, and I love my animals. So the way we would look at that is like, okay, so those are your primary parts. You probably have more, but in this case, you're an animal lover. You probably you're a nature lover and and walking and so for those parts, you've got opposite parts. So it could be that you, instead of nature, you could say, well, I'm an urban person and I love museums and walking around and visiting cafes in a city. Or it could be something like, well, I actually love to stay cozied up in my office. And so that could be a different type of opposite, but they'd both be the hidden parts, maybe the one that doesn't go out or some that maybe is a more urban one. And so as you get to recognize these parts of yourself that are primary or hidden, you realize you're all of them. And what it matters then is which comes to the fore when you need them. And the other thing is that all of our selves have a gift. So one of the exercises, which your listeners are certainly welcome to do, which I think is really terrific, is you take one of those selves, let's just say the nature lover, and you write down, what are the gifts of my nature lover? And it could be anything from it makes me feel connected, it brings me into the present, it makes me feel needed because I can be a shepherd to my animals. Then you ask the opposite question, what is a sting or a downside of that self? Because, again, it's on the spectrum, and you might say for your animal lover, maybe it's I don't go out, I don't say yes to invitations with my neighbors enough, so I sometimes maybe use them too much as an excuse not to push my edge and be more social. So whatever it is, these are personal gifts and stings of a self. But it's really, really empowering to see that. One of the selves I have people talk about, and I've got a whole section devoted to this, is to our envious selves. And I think one of the things that happens when we get stuck is that there's fear of things like envy. And a little known secret is that envying is very painful. But in the same coin, on the other side, to be envied is also painful. And sometimes people are actually stuck because unconsciously they don't want to trigger envy because they fear abandonment. It boils down to that. And they might be abandoned. You know, the friends that want to meet you for coffee and kvetching may not be there for Java and joy. And so I have a whole section about practicing safe success so that you can tolerate these changes that are going to happen when you go from contender to victor, because it is a final eighth transformation. And the stuckness is actually a call for you to listen deeply to what's going on. And then usually once you listen, the parts of you don't have to have the volume up as high. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, let me ask you this. You've got some really interesting case histories that you share, with the dialogue that the client has had with one of themselves, and it's very, very revealing. And the clients invariably kind of gasp when they hear what's coming out of a part of themselves. My question is this something that we can easily do on our own, or do we really need a therapist to help us with this process?
I would say yes and, both, either or. Yes, it is, I think, easy to do because I've set the exercises up so that they're clear and simple, but that doesn't mean they aren't deep. And so for some people, it really will be a natural understanding of what's going on, and then their double bind of being stuck will release. For some people, they may realize, like, for example, that with the resistant self, she was able to shift and handle her drinking, but if she hadn't been, we would have potentially recommended a 12-step program or some other program to help with the issue. So whether you need professional help will depend on what is basically unfurls. Now, every third Thursday of the month at 8 p.m. Eastern, I have a free voice dialogue virtual Zoom shop that everyone is welcome so that they can see how it works, literally. Because sometimes just seeing it once, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. And anyone is welcome to contact me, and I will give the Zoom information for that month. But that's ongoing because it is sometimes hard to envision if you haven't seen it. So every third Thursday of the month at 8 p.m. Eastern, we have 2 different basic voice dialogue sessions that are live. We don't know what's going to happen. I do it with my colleagues so that people to really address what you're talking about is like, how does this work? We've got that going every month. So please, everyone is welcome to join us.
So when you're having this dialogue with yourself, you tell people that they have to sit in different chairs, take up different positions. That kind of allows them, I guess, to transition. I mean, is this something that we know is, a brain thing, that the brain can far more easily switch on or switch off or switch parts if we physically move our body? Is that what helps the process? And also, sometimes people are so shocked by the information. How is it that we can hide this stuff so deeply?
How is it that, I just didn't hear, how is it that, and then
we can disguise some of this or hide this information. If there's a part of us that can, give it to us, why is it such a shock to us?
This is a great question. So, yes, moving to a different part of the room or even just moving over very much helps the brain separate. The idea is that you want to understand that these parts of you only hold part of the picture. And the other thing it does is that all of our selves are in our body. They are physiological experiences. They're energetic experiences. So part of moving over is some of the questions is like, where do you live in the body? And they have different energies. Some could be very staccato and others really still. So you, as a person doing it, you get to literally feel the difference. So that, again, what the biggest thing that or gift is the awareness you grow. So you can start to feel like your fear starting to bubble in your belly. A lot of people literally just are not connected to their body and they don't know what parts of themselves are operating. And so that's part of the journey. And brain imaging is even now showing that we actually store our different senses of our different selves in different parts of the brain. And also some of them, it's closer to the amygdala, which is the emotional center, depending on the parts. And then the more decision-making parts and the CEO parts are toward the front of the brain. So I'm looking forward more and more to what brain imaging is going to show us. But yes, it absolutely helps to clarify what's going on. Because remember, when people are in the final eighth, it's a mystery. They don't understand it. If it makes sense, then you'll just deal with the issue. You'll double down on a particular strategy, and then you'll move through. But this is when you cannot move forward, and you love what you're doing, and it doesn't make sense. And then how we disguise, like how is it we don't know? It's that classic denial. So sometimes we're not ready to face whatever it is. And so it's denial. Part of us is aware, say in terms of this client that was drinking too much, but the denial part, the one that just doesn't want to look, that we would say that that's a part. And sometimes it's a distorted loyalty. A part is kind of hidden because we don't want to deal with that information that part is holding, whether it's holding the truth that your relationship is no longer the right relationship for you. Because a lot of these parts, the reason it's so shocking is less that it's information that wasn't so clear before and more about the ramifications of what that means you're going to have to do in your life if you choose to deal with it. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. So let's talk about double binds and how they prevent us from reaching our goals. And tell us about this exercise that you have where you had somebody drawing on a piece of paper.
The one with the tug of war image?
Yes, where you divide the stick figures and dividing the paper into four.
Okay. Yeah, I love this exercise, and it's a pretty unique one. So the idea is that we have, different selves in relation to the goal. So a double bind is an unresolvable dilemma. And so you have parts of you that are for your goal, and they've worked hard. They've gotten you 7/8 of the way there. They believe you can do it. And then when you're stalled, those parts are against your goal. And that's what you're trying to find out. Why? What's going on? And so a couple of things. One, I'm going to give you two exercises. One is that you can draw a tug-of-war image and write down the parts that are for your goal and the parts that seem to be against your goal. And then when you literally can see that on the piece of paper, you can see which parts are involved, and then you can find out more about each part. And then another exercise I have, which is you draw basically like 4 blocks. You just do a big T, and you think about a literal time where you were stuck, and you just stopped, and you draw it. One I think I put in there was Zoe is a client that's in the book. Hers was about finding her life's partner, and she drew herself literally afraid to knock on the door of this person who had invited her over for tea that she was interested in, and she ended up fleeing and not knocking on the door and not showing up to the invitation, and then feeling terrible because for her the final 8th was part of her felt she was unlovable. And then the part that was too scared to risk finding out that in fact was false, that she was unlovable, was the final 8th issue. And so the part that still believed she was worthless was the one that said, nope, you're not going to knock on that door. And it's the thing about drawing is then it's not an intellectual exercise. It's a way to process it in a different form. In other words, the drawing bypasses the intellectual aspect of logically understanding what's going on, which is important, but this is another way in to getting underneath the dynamic of what's stalling you in front of your finish line.
Mm. You say in the book that a crisis can move us to create a new self, or to get familiar with selves we already have and engage them as allies. Can you give us an example of this?
Yes. I mean, the great thing is that I feel like brain plasticity, we have inner selves plasticity. So developmentally, when we go from toddlers to kindergarten and first grade, we grow student selves. And when we move into adolescence, we grow relationship selves and hormonal desire selves. So again, I just want to highlight that everything we're talking about is taking something that happens naturally and bringing awareness to it. So flexibility and resilience is about being able to access other parts of yourself. And so COVID is now with us, so much insecurity, whether it's election insecurity, food and health insecurity, and social unrest, civil unrest. And if we're able to say, all right, what parts would I like to cultivate so that I can deal with this better? So many working parents never had being homeschool supervisor as part of their to-do list. And now they must, and they must do as good a job as they can if they want their children to be educated during this very difficult time and be okay when it goes back to being a non-COVID era and however it is that we're going to be moving into the new way. And so when you can cultivate a self to handle these situations, it's really a wonderful feel of empowerment. And you can use it by looking at someone you admire and say, all right, I don't want to be that person, but I really like how this person does good research and finds out some alternatives, like, say, with homeschooling. And that's another way to cultivate that part in you and just know, like, that part wasn't in the forefront because it wasn't necessary, but now it's necessary. And again, this happens when people get diagnoses. You know, they were disease-free, and then they get a really difficult diagnosis. Then they've got to have parts that can help them through it, including, I believe, spiritual parts and intuitive parts to just key in to ideally help yourself to the best possible way.
You're listening to What is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'm speaking with author, therapist, and founder of the New York Voice Dialogue Institute, Bridgit Dengel Gaspard, about her book, The Final Eighth, Enlist Your Inner Selves to Accomplish Your Goals, which offers a powerful process for identifying the hidden facets of us that stand in the way of achieving our goals. We'll be back with more after the break.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living, a chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
I'm Fidel Mshombo. I was born in a city called the Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee and they resettle you to America and all your problems are done. They don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Bridgit Dengel Gaspard. There's a chapter in your book which is all about, or a segment in your book, which is all about the forgiveness trap. Now, this got my attention because we're always being told that we've got to forgive. It's non-negotiable. We have to learn to forgive people in our life. And you have a slightly different take on that. And you say that the pressure to forgive can, in a sense, feel like the bad old days when we just shut up and we don't really forgive. We just stop sharing. So tell us about how we can maneuver through that one.
So this is both my dilemma as well as dilemma of many of my clients. And so if and when forgiveness happens, I'm not against forgiveness. But I began to realize that forgiveness and the pursuit of it often became a mirage goal. It's almost a way that they stalled on their own personal final eighth goals. And my clients struggled valiantly to forgive the terrible things that had happened to them and the negative things. And I began to realize that they could still move forward on their cherished goal with or without forgiveness, and that the parts of them just felt somehow that something was wrong with them because they just couldn't do the forgiveness. And so I realized it was a trap, and that forgiveness can come in its own time if it does. But I watched people really lose years wrestling with this as opposed to building their own life that they love. And so I began to realize that different parts of us will always hold that story of that rough thing that happened. And that's okay, because that is part of why you're here in the manner that you are, and ultimately provides the gifts that make you so strong. And that we don't have to get rid of those selves that know the difficult history, but you can embrace them and hold them with compassion, and they don't have to lead the show, and you don't have to tell them they're wrong or say, well, that's okay, so-and-so did their best, as if that somehow should be enough to forgive. And it feels very invalidating often, and that's where I said about the bad old days of being shut up, like, the pressure is on, and so then you just be quiet, so maybe it looks like you're forgiving, but you're still struggling with that. And then I created an exercise that is so freeing for a lot of people. I'm like, let's do the reverse. It's a little taboo. And we do blameographies, and it's in the style of a bibliography where you just do the bullet points, like the source of the pain, a little bit, the date, and a little bit of maybe the title of what happened. So you don't go into it. And that was so freeing, because it's a way to just have the energy for yourself, as opposed to feeling like you're a bad person because you're not able to forgive and forget. And that's how that came to pass. And then often what happens is as people live the life that they love because they have broken through their final eighth impasse, the compassion and the forgiveness kind of come as side effects. Like they look up one day and realize, wow, it's a tender spot, but I'm not seething in rage or revenge fantasies or any of those things. But I realized just focusing on the forgiveness for many, many people didn't work. It didn't give you the forgiveness, and it didn't make you build the life you loved.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it involves so many parts of us. I mean, parts of us, are really feeling angry and upset and hard done by, and other parts are feeling guilty because we can't get to this place of compassion and forgiveness.
Yes.
And still other parts of us just, want someone to hug us and say, yeah, that was crap, that was a bad situation, and you're right to feel upset.
Exactly. And there's such freedom in that. Often, and again, everyone thinks it might take years, but often just what you said, that validation. I know, my gosh, that's horrible. Sometimes that's like, thank you, I thought so. I can move over now. Because also often what's sticking us is something way back in our past. And so we only have the developmental knowledge of that era. So if something happened to you when you were 7 or even 17, you dealt with it at a 7-year-old level or a 17-year-old level. And this process brings you up to contemporary times, whatever age you are. So you also get to use all this wisdom that you've gained because you've lived longer and say, oh, I know, it was rough, and that's okay. We don't have a household like that anymore. Maybe one of the gifts is you don't yell at your kids because you made a pact that you're not going to do that. So again, the gifts may be painful to have gotten, but you can then have a whole different relationship, like you said, with the guilt, with the need for validation. And when the pressure is off about to forgive or not to forgive, often forgiveness rolls in, like on its own.
Yeah, you naturally let it go. You also raise a very interesting point, which is, are your dreams really yours? And there could be a part of us protecting us from achieving a goal, because that's not our dream. That's our parents' dream.
Exactly. Well, a couple things. When I was writing the book, I realized at a certain point, I thought, oh my gosh, this book is only for type A personalities, how to get your goal. And I thought, I have to do a whole chapter why you should leave your goal, because that's the other side. And then that's where I really explored, like there's exercises in the book. Ask yourself, are you stuck because it's not your goal? It's what your parents wanted? Also, maybe it was your goal once, but it doesn't fit anymore. And a lot of very well-meaning people in your circle say you aim to get your PhD, and it's ABD, all but dissertation. You've done the research, and you're 7/8 of the way through the paper, but you just aren't interested anymore. It takes a lot of courage sometimes to walk away from, say, finishing and getting your PhD, because it's just not calling to you anymore, and your friends and family are going to say, are you sure? You worked so hard, it took so long. And so you're going to have to really go in deep. Are you sure? But if you are, and the book talks about practicing safe success so you can handle the loving concerns of the people in your circle, and also have the boundary like, no, I really have made this decision. I don't want to put 2 more years into this. I just don't, and that kind of thing. And there's such freedom, like, of being able to just say, I'm done. And another client, she was working, she was writing a memoir, and she was working through this emotional abuse that she had gone through. And then it came time to put it out to publishers and maybe even consider self-publishing. And she had this epiphany in our work, which was like, wait, I'm done. The actual purpose of this writing was really for me to heal this emotional abuse. And it was really never memoir material. And it was, again, she was very happy about that because she was feeling like a failure. Like, she wrote this book, it was a book, this manuscript, and so she should. Again, lots of shoulds. And then you get to say, well, wait a minute. If it's a should, it's not worthwhile. If it's a want, okay. And then, because she had healed, then she was able to focus on what her next steps were, which was unrelated to writing. And so sometimes then you're thankful you had the goal that you wanted to write a memoir, that part of you, and then what you didn't realize that this other part of you was going to get healed, and that was the ultimate purpose.
So what about, you talk about core negative beliefs. I mean, many of us do know that we've got certain belief systems, and they are quite negative, but we just don't know how to get rid of them. How would we get rid of them using this process?
They're very difficult to get rid of. So I always like to start with saying core negative beliefs are always, always, always false. And they're so painful. I'm not lovable. I'm worthless. Nothing works out. They're incredibly painful. So what is true is that you were told somehow that you were that terrible thing, and you made decisions as if it were true. So maybe you didn't speak up for a promotion because your core negative belief says, you're worthless, so don't speak up. So you are going to have grief regarding the decisions you made as if these core negative beliefs were true, but they are false. They've always been false. And what you find out in terms of the final eighth stuckness is that often the parts of you that are stopping you from going from a contender to a victor are those that have a distorted loyalty to the core negative belief. And when we got these core negative beliefs, it's when we were very young. And so the reason they're so hard to shift off, intellectually you can say, I know that's not true, but then emotionally you can't, you're in a depression or an anxiety because you can't let go of it as if it were true. And it's because it was put in us so early. And so again, we honor those parts, and the parts of us that can navigate the world as adults, as healthy adults, can take over. And so part of it is realizing that, all right, I see what's happening, that sometimes it's really an early loyalty, like you don't want to leave your father's credo of like things don't work out, and my book talks about that. And a lot of it is grieving, like I'm sorry I was told that. I'm sorry that my parents were told that about themselves and passed it along. And again, you could argue that might be in the vein of forgiveness, and it probably is, but it's not the purpose. And that you move off of them, you realize what parts know that it's not true, because those parts got you 7/8 of the way there. And I talk about how the inner critic plays both sides. The inner critic pushes you to do these things, so it believes in you and tells you you can do it, and then it plays the other side. It tells you you're not worth doing. And so I also reveal how the inner critic plays both sides. And then once you realize that and do a few exercises to really understand how that works in your particular situation, it really is freeing. And a lot of these, I say, are like the Achilles heel. They're always going to be tender, but they don't have to be wounds that are open and bleeding. And And that is a massive difference.
There's a lot in here that seems rather similar to NLP. Different parts work, some of the things that you talk about. In NLP, you can scratch the record. You've got this belief system or this, default mode that you go to, and there are processes you can use to scratch the record there. So I guess we're, addressing this thing that we've just been discussing about the critic and the negative beliefs. NLP might be able to get rid of it. Is there nothing that, could you not use an NLP technique on that in this?
I love that, yes. And I'm a fan of NLP. And so two things. One is why I love this final eighth process is I want everyone to use everything they've learned. So if you know NLP, often when you unknot your double bind, then you have access to all these extraordinary skills you've worked hard to attain. And so, but if you're using NLP as like that, just those parts of yourself, it actually invalidates the other parts that maybe feel like, wait a minute, like the parts that feel stupid, like, this was not ever true. And so it's invalidating. So I would say the voice dialogue in the final eighth process can actually help the NLP work, because you can also, like you just naturally did, validate the part that was hurt, and it's not to be pushed away, but it's to but other parts can understand. This is a default that that no longer fits. I sometimes envision the core negative belief as a big rug that you're standing on, a carpet. And if you are standing on that carpet, and the carpet is the core negative belief, like nothing works out, it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in a cave or at a ball or in Capitol Hill as a congressperson, that carpet is going to be with you. And so I look at it more like then you want to step off the carpet, and you can then look at your core negative beliefs and realize, wow, that's I don't have to have everything be in relation to my core negative beliefs. I can be free from that. And the varying techniques that are out there, including NLP, they're terrific. It's often, again, the final eighth process is what's helpful when you are mysteriously stuck, like when your NLP techniques aren't working in the way you want them. So what's going on? Because this really is about talented, dedicated, motivated people. Like, they do the work and then are mysteriously stalled.
Yeah. Well, we're almost at the end of the show, so very, very quickly, tell me, what is the most important thing that you want readers of your book to know? That your curiosity will really be rewarded. So instead of falling into the negativity of, say, your core negative belief, this method of looking at what's going on gives you energy as long as you stay curious. And then you get to meet golden aspects of yourself, alter egos like your visionary, your optimist, your creative one. And it's so energizing. And it's almost like you're going to shift your inner lifestyle into a wellness lifestyle like you couldn't imagine. Well, thank you for that. Now, would you quickly tell us before we finish up what you've mentioned earlier about these 3 sessions that you offer? So every third Thursday of the month at 8 p.m. Eastern on Zoom, my colleague and I offer a free virtual voice dialogue workshop where we show 2 different basic small sessions so you can literally see how it works. And it's a great companion to the book. And just contact me directly. I'm at finaleighth@finaleighth.com. I'm all over social media, and I'm happy to give you the Zoom info for that month. And we welcome everyone. It's really terrific. And they're live sessions, so it's not rehearsed. You are going to literally see what it is that particular time. And then, of course, as you watch the third Thursday of the month, you can think about the selves in you that are similar to the selves that are being addressed in the session. It's really wonderful. Bridgit Dengel Gaspard, thank you for joining us. Thanks for having me. You're welcome. So the final 8, Enlist Your Inner Selves to Accomplish Your Goals, is published by New World Library. For more information about the book and Bridgit, Dengel Gaspard. Visit final8.com, and that is numeral digit final8th.com. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. You can learn more about me and the No BS Spiritual Book Club at my website, sedgbeer.com. That's it for this week. I'll be back again next week with another edition of What is Going On. Till then, it's goodbye from me.